The North Atlantic is cold, unforgiving, and for a brief window in the Second World War, it was home to the most feared surface combatants of the Kriegsmarine. History remembers the Bismarck. It remembers the dramatic pursuit, the destruction of the HMS Hood, and the final, desperate stand against the Royal Navy. But in the frozen fjords of Norway, a second Titan waited in the shadows. The Tirpitz, often dismissed as a mere twin, a carbon copy built to the same blueprints. The Tirpitz was not just a duplicate, it was an evolution. If these two sister ships, the absolute pinnacle of German naval engineering, had been turned against one another in a vacuum of steel and fire, the outcome would not be a coin toss. The subtle, lethal differences between them reveal a clear victor. To understand who survives, we must strip away the myths and look strictly at the evolutionary upgrades engineered into the second hull. At a glance, they appear identical. Both spanned over 250 meters. Both carried 838 centimeters C-34 guns in for twin turrets, and both utilized the same distributed, World War I-style turtleback armored citadel. But the Tirpitz was laid down later, allowing German naval architects to learn from the construction flaws of the Bismarck. By the time the Tirpitz entered service, it was heavier, sitting deeper in the water with a displacement that exceeded its sister by more than 2,000 tons. This was not dead weight, it was the weight of adaptation. The Tirpitz was modified to survive the harsh reality of modern naval warfare, a reality that the Bismarck was sunk too quickly to ever experience. In a hypothetical duel between these two leviathans, the battle begins long before the first shell is loaded into the breech. It begins with situational awareness. The Bismarck suffered from primitive radar capability. Its FUMO-23 sets were fragile, notorious for knocking themselves out from the sheer concussive shock of the ship's own main battery line of fire. In contrast, the Tirpitz received continuous electronic upgrades throughout its career. It was outfitted with more advanced FUMO-26 and FUMO-27 radar arrays, featuring larger, more sensitive antennas. In an engagement shrouded by Arctic fog or the smoke of heavy burning fuel, the Tirpitz would lock its eyes onto the Bismarck first. It would establish the range, calculate the deflection, and ready its guns while the Bismarck was still searching the horizon, relying on optical rangefinders that could be easily blinded by sea spray and cordite smoke. When the guns open fire, the ballistic profile is terrifyingly symmetrical. Both ships fire the same 800-kilogram armor-piercing projectiles. These shells leave the muzzles at over 800 meters per second, traveling on a flat, high-velocity trajectory. Because German doctrine favored this high muzzle velocity, the shells would strike at shallow angles on long ranges. Here lies the irony of the Bismarck-class design. The turtleback armor layout, featuring a thick slope behind the main belt, was practically impenetrable at close range, but it left the upper decks vulnerable to plunging fire from afar. At distances greater than 20 kilometers, both ships have the capacity to punch straight through each other's thin upper horizontal armor. However, the Tirpitz possesses an offensive asset that the Bismarck completely lacked: heavy torpedo armament. Mounted on the upper deck were two quadruple 21-inch torpedo tubes. In a swirling, close-range engagement where both capital ships are battered, obscured by smoke, and maneuvering aggressively, these torpedoes change the tactical equation entirely. The Bismarck's underwater protection was rated to withstand a massive TNT blast, but it was highly vulnerable to repeated localized flooding. The mere presence of torpedoes forces the Bismarck to maneuver defensively, limiting its ability to maintain a stable firing platform, while the Tirpitz can actively look for an opening to deploy a lethal underwater strike. As the shells begin to find their marks, the structural differences in internal damage control become a matter of life and death. The Bismarck's internal layout was flawed by exposed communication lines. Crucial cables linking the main fire control directors to the turrets ran above the main armored deck, meaning that even minor splinter damage could and did render the ship functionally blind and unable to coordinate its gunfire. The architects fixed this on the Tirpitz, rerouting vital electrical and communication conduits deeper within the armored citadel. The Tirpitz was built to take a beating and keep its guns talking. Furthermore, the Tirpitz was equipped with a radically overhauled auxiliary machinery setup. It featured an automated, centralized control system for its electrical grid, allowing damage control teams to reroute power instantly. When sections of the ship were blasted open, the Bismarck relied on a more fragmented, manual system that collapsed rapidly under the weight of British shellfire. If both ships take identical hits to their forward compartments, the Tirpitz's pumps will stay online longer, its lights will remain on, and its turrets will continue to train smoothly, while the Bismarck will suffer from creeping power failures that slow down ammunition hoists and manual turret operation. We must also look at the secondary and anti-aircraft artillery, a factor that directly impacts superstructure survival. While neither ship would use anti-aircraft guns against the other's main armor, the Tirpitz was covered in a dense forest of 37mm and 20mm flak guns, far surpassing the Bismarck's initial layout. In a prolonged gun duel, these rapid-fire weapons would decimate the unarmored bridge structures, tearing apart the optical rangefinders and exposed crew of the Bismarck. The Tirpitz's superstructure was a hardened fortress of light automatic weaponry, designed to strip away anything that moved on the enemy's upper decks. The final, deciding factor in this clash of steel is propulsion and weight distribution. Because the Tirpitz was heavier due to increased fuel capacity, extra equipment, and sturdier internal bulkheads, its metacentric height was slightly different. It was a more stable gun platform in heavy swells. The Bismarck was known to roll sharply in rough Atlantic seas, which complicated the work of the mechanical fire control computers. The Tirpitz, sitting lower and heavier, offered its gunners a fractionally steadier view of the target. In a game where a variance of half a degree means a shell misses by 500 meters, stability is everything. Imagine the climax of this duel. The Bismarck, fighting with superb optics but failing radars, struggles to maintain a consistent solution as the concussive force of its own guns jars its delicate electronics. The Tirpitz, tracking via its hardened fumo rays, maintains a steady rhythm of fire. A shell from the Tirpitz plunges through the Bismarck's weak upper deck, severing the exposed fire control cables. Suddenly, the Bismarck's turrets are forced to switch to local control, their accuracy dropping drastically. The Tirpitz closes the distance, confident in its rerouted internal power systems and protected communications. At 12,000 meters, the Tirpitz launches a spread of torpedoes from its deck tubes. The Bismarck, sluggish from water intake in its forward compartments due to its inferior automated pumping system, cannot turn fast enough. The torpedoes strike home below the armor belt, compounding the catastrophic damage. The Bismarck was a pioneer, a terrifying proof of concept that shook the British Empire to its core. But the Tirpitz was the refined weapon system, built with the benefit of hindsight and engineered to correct the fatal vulnerabilities of its older sister. In a pure and yielding battle of attrition between the twin giants of the Third Reich, the Tirpitz emerges from the smoke, battered but operational, while the Bismarck is claimed once more by the depths,